Hello and welcome to the Let's Make a Profit podcast. I'm Roger Sargent, and with me is the co-host of this great podcast, Rebecca Howell. How are you?
I'm great. Thank you, Roger. How are you?
Very, very good.
Good.
Rebecca is the founder of Custom Bookkeeping and Accounting, and she's a certified Profits First advisor, and we're going to get into that much later into the podcast. But today we are talking about nothing more than COVID-19. It just seems like that's just a topic, and probably you're going to hear Rebecca and I say pivot probably 15 million times, because if it's not the word COVID-19, it's pivot. That's all we talk about anymore. So today, specifically, we're going to talk about, applying for your forgiveness. If you're a business owner out there and you got lucky and you got the PPP funds to help you out for that 8 or 24-week period, well, the time has come. Mm-hmm. Not with all institutions yet, because
not quite.
Not quite yet. But for the most part, most institutions have opened up their doors and opened up the application lines to do it. But there's a lot of things you need to understand about applying for the forgiveness, and so that's really what Rebecca wants to talk about today. Is because there's rumor out there that if you don't create your application correctly and turn it in correctly, it might not be approved.
Might not.
Yeah. And plus, we all know how busy we are as business owners, so why have to do that darn application and resubmit it over and over and over again? So let's just do it right the first time. So that's what we're going to talk about today. But first, Rebecca, tell us a little bit about you and why you want to help the business owner out.
I'm a small business owner myself. I started my business in 2003 down in Arizona, and it was more or less just finding something that I was good at, and bookkeeping just came very natural to me. And as my business has grown, I have been able to provide more services to clients with payroll and tax returns, and now with my new certification that I've gotten, getting into Profit First cash management assessments and helping businesses become profitable. So the reason for this whole podcast was to share Profit First and how small business owners can grow and really get back to the values of why they started their business, what they wanted to get out of their business, and to grow the appreciation that they may have lost because they just aren't getting what they wanted out of their business. So,
and because this is really only the second episode of the Let's Make a Profit podcast, I just want everybody out there to know that I'm a business owner, I'm a business consultant, and I see a lot of business owners out there that really don't have a full understanding of their financials. Mm-hmm. And on top of that, there's a lot of people out there that have got on their resume somehow, some way, the title of bookkeeper, and having the title of bookkeeper on your resume does not mean that you know everything and anything about bookkeeping. And so I can tell you first and foremost that Rebecca and her staff at Custom Bookkeeping, they understand your numbers. They understand how to obviously do the bookkeeping end of things. But really where they stand apart, and this is in my view, and I'm sure there's other bookkeepers out there in the world that do the same thing, but there's not very many of them. So that's why I'm doing this virtual pat on the back for Rebecca and her staff, is that they actually understand the numbers that they put together for their clients, and they actually can have a good conversation with the clients. So that way they are not just doing bookkeeping, but they're actually doing some education and maybe even some consulting to help them better off. And now that you're a certified Profit First advisor, cash management, that is key. Everybody says, cash is king. Well, I don't think that's really the case. I think cash management is king, and the reward you're thrown is the cash. But you got to first learn how to manage it, and that's really where you come into play. And obviously, even with this COVID-19 pandemic and everything that's going on with the PPP, there's still some management that needs to go on.
Probably more so now than ever, really.
Exactly. So let's talk about COVID-19 and asking for forgiveness.
Our big key point to why we're having this one
today. Exactly. So there are two applications that you are going to be put in front of you. Okay, which one should they use?
Well, and first I want to start off with, there is so much information out there. I mean, I think every day, if you've read any news feed, you're overwhelmed. and I've tried to stay focused and informed, but trying not to, at the same time, get overwhelmed myself. And at the same time, clients are sending emails saying, hey, we got this email from our banker, or we got this article, and having to do all the fact checks on it, really diving down and understanding that. So when we started talking about this, I was like, just trying to simplify the PPP application forgiveness process. It gets overwhelming.
There's nothing simple about it.
There really isn't. And I'm trying to help as much as I possibly can in simplifying it. But realistically, the whole thing is don't try to do this by yourself. I've created a checklist which will help you have those conversations with your bookkeeper or your accountant, or even just understanding what needs to be done, what the steps are. So realistically, the first step is have you spent all your money? Because the SBA is going to require that you have spent all your money before you start your forgiveness application. And then the second part is, which form do you fill out? How do you qualify for a form? So they did come up with a 3508 Easy form, which was kind of a simplified, I think it's a 3-page application versus like a 9 or 11-page application. So 9 pages is extremely daunting within itself. But, and I mentioned this in our last podcast, that National Federation of Independent Business, they did a survey on this. 43% are thinking that they're going to probably use the Easy form. 57% don't even know where to start. So to help them kind of go through this process, and I've broken down very basic information on what is the difference. And all of this it matters of what your covered period is. And we talked about the 8-week or the 24, and we'll go into a little bit more depth on that. But most people that are self-employed are going to use the Easy form. Borrowers that did not reduce wages that were paid and their number of employees. So you have to get that, make sure that and is. It's not an or. You have to have paid the same amount as you did prior to COVID, and you have to have the same number of employees you did have prior to COVID. So that is the Easy form in a nutshell.
Yep.
There is a stipulation in the Easy form that if you were unable to stay open because of restrictions, that if you did not reduce your wages and your employees under 25%, you can also use the Easy form. And then you have to make sure that you have stayed in those stipulations. If you haven't, then unfortunately the long form is your next option. So if you were able to get back at some capacity, restaurants kind of being the key part to this,
right,
there we're only able to get to 25% capacity. So you're not going to get to your staff numbers or your wages that you paid prior to COVID. So they have made the long form, which is a little bit more questions, a little bit more information. Were you able to, before the end of your covered period, get back to full capacity? Or there's a stipulation that they've now put into a safe harbor. And I'm really just going to kind of read what the safe harbor is, because it's kind of overwhelming within itself too. So basically the safe harbor qualifications were that if you were unable to operate between February 15th and your covered period, so the 8 or the 24 week, at the same capacity, and you were unable to bring back your employees and pay your wages, then you had a safe harbor, but you had to be within those restrictions of the Secretary of Health Services, the Department of Centers Disease Control. So if they controlled whether you could or could not open, that qualified you for safe harbor.
Does that include the governor's office?
No, I mean, it really was the Secretary of Health and Human Services, Director of Center of Disease Controls and Prevention, and Occupational Safety and Health Administration. So OSHA.
Yeah. So how did the governor get involved? Do you know? I mean, because really, from time to time, I'm a business owner. I've got 3 of them out there, and when we thought we were able to open, the governor closed the door on us.
Yeah, I mean, it's just that they didn't handle this really well. I think that the governor tried to do the best he could, but I think he overstepped on some small businesses.
And not just in Washington State. So we're not picking on Governor Inslee by any stretch of imagination.
This went across.
Right.
I mean, Arizona was just as bad in where I came from. So
Right.
I follow Arizona news and just listening and talking to my family. It wasn't any different down in Arizona.
Right.
I think it was just the unknown, and people went to the extreme and then may have realized that, okay, we can take some smaller steps, but I don't think that the steps proceeded quick enough.
Right.
So the restaurants and like your health club, I mean, we've talked about this before. It's you guys struggled because you didn't have any options.
Yeah, we just opened 2 weeks ago.
So you're going to kind of fall into this category of having to do the long form because you were unable to open based on COVID restrictions.
So it's almost like we're being penalized because we couldn't open.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Boy, that makes me feel good.
I know.
Boy, this is a bright and cheery conversation, isn't it?
I'm bookkeeping and PPP and government and banking and all this stuff. I mean, we can try to make it as polite and happy as possible, but it really is.
Where's Paul Long in his lap when you? We need Paul Long here, the great banker, to keep this light, right?
Yeah. So, I mean, we're trying not to, and I don't want to frustrate anybody.
Absolutely.
I'm really just trying to put the information out there and let them know that this is not a simple solution. This application is a detailed application process. Even the easy form, 3 pages, that's not easy.
No.
I mean, I'm looking at 1 page easy.
Yeah.
But don't do this alone because it can be frustrating, and we're trying to prevent that frustration.
Absolutely.
So
I know another big component of the PPP application, forgiveness application, is really the covered period. So what does that mean? How is it determined?
Well, anybody that received their money prior to June 5th had the option of picking an 8-week cover period or a 24-week cover period. And what that did was allow you to use your funds in 8 weeks, or if you weren't able to use your funds in 8 weeks, then you could stretch it out to the 24. And when we originally applied, I mean, the requirements were you did 2.5%.
Right.
2.5. So most people were not spending their money in the 8-week period. And when I did the calculations on it, I think most people would be better off to do the 24-week period. My funds came in May 1st. So I have until about mid-October before the end of my covered period. And then anybody around July 1st area would actually get until mid-December. And then after that covered period ends, you have 10 months to put in for your application, your forgiveness application. So this is not something that you want to rush into, but at the same time, don't wait till the last minute either. Don't procrastinate on this. But make sure that you have the proper paperwork, you have the application filled out correctly, and that you're ready to do it, but take the time to make sure that you get these things in place.
Okay, so now I hope everybody just heard what you just said, because I know there's a lot of them out there, and I don't know what the percentage, but I know there's a lot of you out there who, when these funds became available, you struggled getting all your paperwork, all your documents that you needed to just fill out the application to get the PPP loans. Mm-hmm. So if you hadn't learned your lesson, and I'm not here to, to chew anybody out here, but if you haven't learned your lesson, we've got some time. She just talked to you about the time period and the covered period. So what you need to do is you need to start getting those documents together. And at the end of the podcast, we're going to show really the checklist that you've put together for these people. But like she said, this is not something to procrastinate on, because the last thing you want is to find out that this PPP fund that you got that should have been 100% forgiven is not because you were not prepared to submit the application properly for your forgiveness. All right, and just heed that. All right, so I just set the stage for it. So what documents are going to be needed?
Really, anything related to payroll is going to be the key factor. So your 941 reports, which some people just became aware of what those were.
Right.
Your quarterly filings, your state withholding, your state quarterly filings, also health insurance, employer retirement was covered in there, and also the employer state taxes.
Right.
So this all was funds that could be used for those things. And then non-covered payroll, which is rent, mortgage interest, utilities. So those things you will need bank statements, check copies, details of when you spent that money, because it needs to make sure that it's within your period.
Right.
When you spent that money and how much did you spend. I created a spreadsheet for all my clients when they received their PPP money, so we knew exactly the date that they spent it on payroll, the date they spent it on rent, the date that they spent it on utilities, and then we knew exactly what date they finished spending their money. So we could calculate that covered period pretty well.
So what if you were your business and you're the owner and you, instead of paying yourself payroll, you took draws? How is that affected?
They're going to look for, and self-employed people, a lot of times they transfer, which is, it's going to be hard. I mean, yes, you're going to have to prove, you're probably going to need your business bank statements and your personal bank statements. It would have behooved them to actually write themselves a check to do a draw, but most business owners probably didn't do it that way. So the SBA is going to probably ask for both business bank accounts to see that those transfers did go from the business to the personal, and those were considered draws.
Okay. So since we're talking about owners and their pay, I know there's a cap that was put upon for both one period of time and another covered period of time. So why don't you tell us about that?
This is officers' compensation, because when we originally submitted the application, they said that officers that were paid more than $100,000, you could not put that into your calculation. So when you were calculating your 2.5%, it had to be capped at $100,000 for officers. So the 8-week period is capped at $15,385. The 24-week period is capped at $20,833. So that is what they've kind of calculated at. The 2.5% is what the owner's compensation can be capped at. So that is the only amount for owner's compensation that can be included in the application.
Okay. And will that be the same approach with the owners that took draws?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. All right. So, all right. We've kind of talked about that. We're going to show you this checklist here in a little bit here, but we got this one chance. You guys have this one chance to do it right the first time, and I'm just going to say from a business owner standpoint, a business consultant standpoint, that there's a good chance somewhere either right before the election or right after the election, there's going to be another round of some type of funding for the small business. I don't know if it's going to be called PPP or not, but there's going to be some funding available.
We're hoping so, yes.
Yeah, exactly. And so there's no reason to procrastinate on this, because the information that you're putting together now is probably going to be used to apply for the next loan, which we're going to talk about in another podcast. But please, everybody, don't procrastinate and really get this stuff in order, get your financials in order, so that way you're fully forgiven for this one, for the first wave. And if there is a second wave, which we all hope there is, as small business owners, that now you're fully prepared and you don't have to freak out and stress out over that. So in closing, Rebecca, give the audience one more final pep talk, and really what do they need to do to get through this?
One of the things, and it kind of keeps coming up in my mind as we're sitting here talking, is Parkinson's law. Mike Mikowitz, the author of Profit First, he talks about this a lot, that procrastination. Parkinson's law, if you are given 8 weeks to get something done, you'll get it done in 8 weeks. If you're getting 10 months to get something done, you're going to wait 10 months. But what I want to tell people is, and I'm speaking to, and I don't want to call out the procrastinators, but I really am, is that please don't wait till the end, because the SBA has a tremendous amount of applications to process, and you don't want to submit your application and get it denied and then realize that you ran out of time because you did wait till the last minute. So I'm suggesting let's wait till at least after elections to see if maybe the Senate and the House and the Representative, I mean, just Congress in general, comes up with a certain dollar amount. I mean, we're kind of hoping for the 150. Lately, they've been talking about it just dropping down to about 50,000, which would help a lot of small business owners, especially the people that I'm working with,
Right.
that didn't get a lot of PPP money. And if we don't have to go through all these hurdles, that would be nice. So I'm at least saying let's wait until the election and then, of course, wait for your covered period. But within that, I mean, I would start considering doing this within, 8 to 10 weeks afterwards, because then it gives you time that if you submit it wrong and it gets denied and the SBA does allow you to submit it again, that you still have time to do so. But we also have to think about, let's get it right the first time rather than thinking that, we get another opportunity. Because SBA hasn't shared that they're going to give us opportunities or how many.
Right.
So I really think that it behooves you to do it right the first time and ask the questions. Talk to, another reason I did this checklist was if you haven't gotten in contact with me or somebody else that's done some of this research, go to your bookkeepers or your accountants and use this checklist and ask them, can you help me with this? And if they kind of look at you blankly or say, I really haven't spent that much time on it, find somebody else that has.
And really, whatever you do, in closing for me is don't be penny wise and pound foolish here. The bottom line is that that right now you've already used this money, and the last thing you want to do is have to pay it all back. And so, if I know money's tight with a lot of you guys out there, spend a couple extra $100 maybe, and have someone do it right the first time. Make sure that you've got the complete application before you hit submit, and find out that you haven't. Because last week when we did the podcast and we had Paul Long from Timberland Bank here, he said that to date 96,000 applications for forgiveness have been submitted, and that's less than 2% of the total amount. Mm-hmm. So you can imagine how overwhelming this is going to be. And the last thing you want is to have to miss that boat and to have to start making payments on that money that was given to you in good faith that you were going to use properly, and now you can't prove that you did. And so, bottom line, just don't try to do cost savings here. Your ROI will come back to you big time if you do it right the first time. And then whatever you do, Rebecca and her staff are ready there to answer any of your questions. So get the checklist. You'll see it here at the end of the podcast. But if you don't fully understand it, call Rebecca and her staff. Get the right answers that you need, as long as they know the right answers. And right now there's still a lot of unknowns. So be prepared for that as well. But at the same time, like Rebecca said, that if you start to hear a lot of from your accountant or your bookkeeper or your banker, you might need to get a second opinion, and don't waste any time on that.
And really, the bankers right now, I mean, they're kind of kicking it back. Yes, they have their own checklist of things that they have to meet per requirements from the SBA. But the bankers are telling you, get with your accountants and your tax preparers. They're not even really saying your bookkeepers, but people that are doing your taxes and are your accountants, they're kicking it back to them to get the documents. So, between your accountant and the banker, you hopefully can get this.
And that's a good thing that you just brought up, because, yes, you own your own bookkeeping company, but you are also a certified tax preparer.
Yes, I am.
Okay. And so just because, Rebecca's company says custom bookkeeping, yes, they do bookkeeping, but they go a lot further beyond that. So like she said, this might not be the question you ask your bookkeeper per se, but you want to get someone that understands really the tax filings. And so that's what Rebecca and her team does.
Absolutely.
All right. Thank you, Rebecca.
Thank
Great
you.
show.
Thank you.